I'm not saying you feel lonely, but sometimes that connection piece, you get so, all of us get so focused on what we're trying to achieve day to day that we can sometimes not even notice that we're going into a lonely kind of place. We forget that we've lost connection. We forget sometimes to make the connections with the people that give us energy, and it's sometimes before you know it, you feel very lonely.
Loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. So it's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
We are arguably more connected than ever through social media, and yet people feel more lonely than ever before, because it's just not that real, genuine connection you would have if you're actually with that person in that same place. And I think sometimes we use that. Years gone by, you would have to go and travel and see those people and connect in real life. Now there's an ability to connect in shorthand messaging and group calls and things. It's just not the same.
Good evening.
We're both laughing as soon as we start the show because I'm having a few technical issues and placement issues. For those that are watching this on YouTube, you'll probably tell by my backdrop I've half covered up a logo because I didn't have time to change it, and I couldn't get my mic to work, couldn't get my camera to work. But here we are. Good to see you, buddy. How have you been?
I've been well. I'm still recovering with the whole foot situation, but it comes and goes. What was quite nice though, the last few days I managed to get in the sea. I think I don't know if I texted you or not, but the sea was ridiculously warm for the UK. My watch was showing 21 degrees on Thursday and then 19, 20 the other days. And it did feel like that. So I was obviously just in swimming trunks, happily in there for 15, 20 minutes. No problem. I've never known it to be so warm. So there goes warming for you. So that was quite nice getting in the water, although I think I did tweak my toe a little bit because it's very pebbly. So I was going in with water shoes so that I kept my toe from moving. But I think when I came out with some of the waves, like my toe flexed and then it flared up for a couple of days. So I'm still recovering from that flare up. But other than that, at least I'm walking all right, and that's all good. How about you?
Well, I have a new gadget I've been testing out, which you might quite like. Thera Cup, which is like cupping, but by the same company, Thera Body, that do smart goggles and the compression boots and stuff. I got that for Father's Day, which is quite a nice little gift because we've been through Father's Day since we last spoke. So the kids got me that, or Lucy got me that by the kids. So that's been quite fun. I've still got a big round bruise on my back where I've been putting it on the highest setting. It leaves its mark, but she's hoping that might help with some inflammation. So that's interesting to try. And yesterday, here's some news. You might be interested in this. I did my first contrast therapy session at home. 20 minutes at 63 degrees in the sauna and 9 degrees for 5 minutes in the ice bath. Start with ice bath, sauna, ice bath, sauna, ice bath, sauna. So that was, I'll be honest,
how long were you doing in each segment?
5 minutes in the ice bath at 9 degrees. Followed by 20 minutes in the sauna, infrared sauna at 63 degrees.
So you must have been in there for hours, 5:20, 5:20, 5:20.
Yeah. About an hour and a half also. Yeah. It was intense, mate. It
was Sunday.
For the first time ever, mate, I fell asleep in front of the television, which I never, ever do. I was worn out by the end of it. I don't know how much I sweated out. And, it was good. I said to my wife, like, we had nothing on, which I'm not used to. She's like, why don't you just relax? Like, why can't you just sit out in the garden? I was like, I can't. I need to have something to do. I need to do something or I'll just go crazy. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll have my own little wellness retreat at home. I'm going to do this. Everyone's been on about this contrast therapy. I get the e-shots from Discover Monk. I've got the Monk Ice Bath. And they're always saying, have you tried contrast therapy? I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a go. I've got the devices at home. Why not? And look, you know what? It was an experience, shall we say. Getting in the ice bath for the third attempt when you got out the sauna, I did not want to get in it, I'll be honest. I was like...
On the sauna though, yeah? Or you finished on
I did finish with the sauna. Yeah, I did some research. Apparently, if you finish with the sauna, it's really good for sleep, which is good for me. Yeah. You finish with the ice bath, it's better for inflammation and recovery. So I finished with the sauna.
Yeah. And you've got an infrared sauna, right? So I'm always curious because that heats up the body from the inside as opposed to you walking into a hot room. So if I was to walk into that room, like, would I just get a normal... I mean, obviously, I guess it's heating the wood a little bit, the infrared stuff. Does it take a while for you to feel that heat after that ice bath?
No. Yes and no. So my body would say no because you start sweating very, very quickly. You can feel it. But actually, the weird thing is, I think the ice bath cools you down so much that I, at one point, had to check the sauna was actually on. I was like, I didn't even notice it, but it obviously was because my body was sweating it out post, but my head didn't feel it. I think by the last time I got in the ice bath as well, like I was proper shivering, whereas usually I can handle 5 minutes pretty easily. But by the third attempt, having gone in from being heating the body up straight into cold again, the third attempt, mate, it was a bit of a war of attrition to get through the final 5 minute spell.
Fair play. I can't say I've done either. I guess my hot cold contrast therapy was very different to yours. I was going in the sea at 20 degrees and coming out into the land at probably 25. And that was my hot cold contrast therapy.
I can't say I'm going to do this every day, but I like, I've always got an hour to kill, but because I've got my hamstring strain, I can't exercise. Usually I go for a run or do something else, but I haven't been able to do that like I'd usually like to. So, and I wanted to do something that I felt productive. I decided today I'm going to get back into shape from today. So I thought that was a good lean in to getting back up to fitness. Done my first 5K run today since I did my hamstring, which I did very slowly, and I really have lost nearly all of my fitness. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a slow build back up. But I thought that would get me in the right headspace for today. So it's been good.
I've done 3 weeks of nothing. I want to start maybe tonight. I'll go back into a bit of yin yoga because I had done 2 weeks of mobility in yin on an almost daily basis and felt that was really good. And then interestingly, I don't feel too bad having had 3 weeks off because sometimes the body needs that time off. We were talking about recovery last session, fit after 40. And you do need more recovery. And I've found in the past sometimes when I've been injured for some minor thing where I've taken 2 or 3 weeks off yoga, I might go back to yoga and actually I feel more flexible than I would have done had I not taken those 3 weeks off. So sometimes that extended break can be really good, but I am itching to get back into it. So there's lots I can do. It's just I've got to be careful when I'm flexing the foot or putting weight on the foot. And because I don't really overly want to think about it too much, I've just done nothing instead of, taking a piecemeal approach. So I'm going to do something today, maybe 15 minutes of yin and try and get to it and stuff.
Well, I did get quite lightheaded running, which shows I'm really unfit. Either that, I was still dealing with this heart.
Yesterday, it might be from yesterday.
Yeah, it could have been that, to be fair. I'm also trialing, so I'll watch this space. Have you seen the IM8? I've definitely been done by Instagram advertising here, but this is David Beckham's new brand. It's like a healthy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I've gone for it, because you and I talked at the Fit for 40 podcast last time we met about all the different supplements we take. It's about 16 to 20 different pills that we take each day. And actually, they've obviously spotted the gap. I don't know, they've heard our podcast. Probably unlikely David Beckham listens to our podcast, but you never know. But either way, pretty much all the supplements that we take, bar a few, are in this list. And the way they're marketing it is, rather than spend £5 per supplement, not £5, more than that, 20 quid per bottle of supplements, they've found a single solution that has all the key things that people tend to buy separately, from omega-3 to vitamin B to K2, whatever, K3, all those kind of things. So I thought, I'll give it a go. It's not inexpensive. It tastes like dishwater. They've got the blue-green algae in there. It always tastes like crap anyway. So it comes with a little card that says, stick with the taste. The more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. But the first time I had it, I was like, oh my God, it's absolutely revolting. Yeah. But it has got slightly easier. I'm going to give it a go. We'll see. So I've gone for the David Beckham starter pack.
I'll see, but it depends on the quantities they've got of those things in there. So I'd have to compare that to my supplements. I've really just stuck with the same green. I just ordered some today, actually. I order it online in the States because it's hard to get now in the UK. But I've been on the same green powder now since 2011, I think.
I think I've got the same one because you recommended it to me. You get chocolate as well, can't you? You get a chocolate or green or whatever.
You can get a chocolate one. Yeah, Amazing Grass.
Yeah. That's it.
And I like it. I like the taste of it. It works for me. So I think taste is really important when it comes to continuing to do something. Some people, like myself and you, will just do it because it's healthy and whatever else. But I need it to be moderately tasty if I'm going to get my mum to drink it or someone else.
It's definitely an acquired taste, shall we say.
Yeah, and it might just be that because if someone's used to sugar and this and the other, maybe I'll drink it and think that is totally fine. I don't know. But I'm not looking to spend however much it is. I mean, I'll look into it. But I probably do need to branch out a little bit on some of the green powders. But I bought a brand in Brighton recently because I didn't have my brand there, Pulsin. And I don't want to belittle them too much, but I really didn't take to it. And it was the chocolate flavour one. But what I did do is I just then bought some raw cacao and added that in. So I'd like a spoonful of the pulsing chocolate protein, which tasted horrible in my opinion, and then a spoonful of the cacao, and then it tasted really nice. So there are workarounds. So if you don't like yours, you can add something to it to make it even better.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you the link to the I-Make one. I don't know how good it's been. I'm going to give it a go. It's got, so I'm quick look at it now. It's got vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, folate, vitamin B12, biotin, pan- pantothenic acid, or as D-calcium, choline, calcium, phosphorus, iodine, magnesium, zinc, selenium, copper. What else we got here? Manganese, chromium, molybdenum, whatever that is, sodium and potassium as the main bits. And also it's got raw superfood, greens, fruits and herbs complex, which has everything from agar, beetroot powder, carrot root powder. It's all the powders, all different roots, spinach leaf powder, all those kind of bits.
I still think
Hydroelectrolytes complex,
it won't.
essential amino and renew complex, and then it's
Yeah.
got digestive enzymes as well. So it's got and a super mushrooms complex in there as well.
Okay.
I'll send it to you on a little link.
From the sound of it, I'm not sure. I still feel like what I put into mine is going to be a little bit better for me. But also, I've been experimenting. I can't remember if I said last week. I might have done, but I bought little 400 ml bottles, and I stacked up smoothies for 2 weeks for my mum. So I batch made and stuck them in the freezer. And she's had all but two of them actually. So she's had 10 of them, which has been really good over the last 2 weeks. I think she actually quite likes them now, and she knows that it just keeps her going. It keeps her going for like the whole until dinner, pretty much. And she's not got a massive appetite anyway. And she'll just take one bottle of that. And she's saying like, you need to sell these, and loads of people have been saying that. So, but it's a lot. There's a lot of logistics and distribution issues when it comes to shipping frozen things. But yeah, it seems like a good solution. You batch make one weekend and you've got for 2 weeks. I personally haven't tried the defrosted ones, so I'm not sure if they'll meet my taste test, but we'll see.
Well, I've just emailed you over the link anyway, so you can have a look at that in your own time. But so I want to talk about today. I know we're talking about the follow-on from last week, but I guess probably sat in my own contrast therapy room for an hour and a half, which is very rare. I do this on my own. An hour and a half is long enough for me to feel lonely. But I had a good chat with my wife and different individuals about this before coming on to today's show. And we talked about, from a podcast I heard recently, which was talking about kind of the silent epidemic. So how loneliness is killing us and what can we do about it? And I thought, let's bring this up to the fore because you and I have talked a lot about your beat model. And I know this is something without sort of making you too vulnerable or putting you on the spot, but within all the different buckets we have to fill to energize ourselves and to really reach optimum health. I think the one thing sometimes by your own admission you struggle with is that social bucket. I'm not saying you feel lonely, but sometimes that connection piece, you get so, all of us get so focused on what we're trying to achieve day to day that we can sometimes not even notice that we're going into a lonely kind of place. We forget that we've lost connection. We forget sometimes to make the connections with the people that give us energy. And it's sometimes before you know it, you feel very lonely. And I think for me, I've had experience where I've been in a really busy space full of people and actually felt like the loneliest person in the room. And sometimes that can come because you've got to the top of your career ladder and actually everyone's just asking you for advice, but you don't feel like you've got a peer group anymore. Maybe it's because you've got loads of success and people don't know how to come to you with that, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you've had a really hard time. People don't know how to connect with you. We've lost our dads recently, both of us. And it's, not everyone knows how to talk to us in that situation. They know it's a difficult thing. So sometimes for them, silence is easy, but at the other end of that, it can make people feel very lonely. I think it's quite a universal experience, right? It touches everyone, regardless of age, color, gender, geography, success. I thought, well, we talked about it briefly with your beat model before. Why don't we tackle it again today? Because I'm sure there'll be listeners out there that are feeling a little bit lonely and may want to get some advice from us on this show. And I also, from my research for this, found out that the World Health Organization actually said that loneliness is currently a global health epidemic, which I did not know. You may be aware of that. I know you teach kids and stuff about this. So that was my idea for today. I don't know what you think. If you've got any, anything.
I think I was looking into this before we came on as well, and I thought it'd be useful to distinguish between, and I think we sort of have already, but this idea between loneliness and social isolation. So social isolation is objective. It's actually a lack of contact, so that can be objectively looked at. Loneliness is more subjective, this idea of feeling alone, and it's not just obviously about being alone, but it's the distress caused by the gap between the desired and actual social connection. I think that's quite interesting because it's different for different people and in different periods of your life. So at some periods of your life, you're not going to feel lonely at all when you've got no one around you for 5 days or 10 days. Maybe that's when you're doing your Vipassana meditation and you're with people, but you're alone. But you don't feel alone because you're feeling connected to spirit and you're feeling connected to another dimension. Whereas when you come out, 2 days and you're going to feel lonely. Now, I've got a very different experience of this to you because you have been constantly surrounded by people, probably, I think, your whole life. I don't think you have done significant periods alone. I've done significant periods alone, be that traveling, where I might spend days by myself, not even speaking to people sometimes, be that living in Brighton, living in flat, living here for 5 years. Now, obviously, the last year, my mum has been here. And I do think about this because how she coped the last 2 weeks. So she's been really busy actually helping my niece with making a Victorian dress and things. So she's quite active, but she gets lonely because she has been around people her entire life. She hasn't spent more than a couple of days by herself up until this last year, and this is a real shock to her. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I do sometimes feel lonely, but I feel more often alone than lonely. And I, yeah, and I definitely agree with you on, I have my symbols everywhere, that social connection piece, right? The connection piece. In my beat model, the connection is about physical and emotional connection to self and others. And so I feel pretty physically and emotionally connected to myself, but not physically and emotionally connected to other people as often as I'd like. Not so bad recently because when I'm in Brighton, I'm around the corner from my sister, my nieces. I see them pretty much every day. Here, I'm seeing my mum, but I definitely feel that with friend groups. And actually, interestingly enough, yesterday I went driving back from Brighton. Randomly, I just texted my mate that I've not seen for 5 years, but we've been friends for 25 years. He was my dive buddy in Thailand when I learned to dive. And I haven't seen him since I first moved into the Barnet place. And so I just texted him, not expecting a response, because we're always trying to meet up and it never works. I said, hey, I'm driving past, I might be close to Epsom. He lives in Epsom, speaking of magnesium salts. And so I popped by there and I hadn't seen him for like 5 years and met his new girlfriend and stuff. And it was really nice. And I felt different driving back. I felt like I'd done something with that Sunday. I felt connected rather than just being by myself in Brighton, which I was.
Gives you energy as well, doesn't it? That connection. It makes you.
Point. Yeah, this is my beat model is all about energy and vitality, and everything that's in there is about giving you energy. And so when I'm with people, often they feel I'm really energetic, and I feel like it's because I've stored up lots of this energy for people. Yeah, but interestingly, you know how most summers or every summer I go to that MVU, Mind Valley University, and that fills my social bucket, although to the detriment of my sleep bucket and everything. I don't know. I'm debating. I've got the ticket for this year, but I've got a few things happening, and I'm debating whether I go. I haven't looked into accommodation yet, but and part of me, which is resistant to not going, is because that is my social catalyst often for the year.
Yeah, get it.
So I probably should do it.
It's easier as well to find a reason not to go. There's a few things that popped up. You mentioned a couple with your mum recently, which maybe want to bring this to the topic of conversation to the fore. One is obviously my mum losing my dad, which she married, as people know from the show I've listened before, when she was only 17 years old. So she's been with him a very long time, over 50 years married. And she said, you know what, Nick, of course I miss him, but the hardest thing is the loneliness, being alone. She's always had someone there. And you said, I probably haven't been alone like you have. And I think that's absolutely true. I haven't had a huge amount of time alone. I don't feel lonely, but you can also feel lonely even if you're surrounded by people sometimes. I'll give an example of that. We had a good conversation with my wife recently, and with the way that we've had things going at home and we've all been focused on work and all these different things, she's going through perimenopause, things like that, but she's developed a little bit of social anxiety about being around others. I was really proud of her because at the weekend she went to a party by herself and she was feeling incredibly anxious to go, but came back really energized having made it. And yet, like if you'd seen the other side, how anxious she was about going, about sort of opening up that energy bucket, that social bucket, was really difficult for her, but it was worth it. But you think, God, it's crazy that she, even in that instance at home, you can feel lonely, even if you're surrounded by your own kids and your husband and your family, but it's a different kind of loneliness. Sometimes we seek a different type of connection. And I'll give another example of my own experience. And you know this, I had some trauma many years ago now, but I became quite agoraphobic, which, like, genuinely, I had the curtains drawn and wouldn't leave the house. I was surrounded by family during that traumatic moment. My dad was there, mum was there, my family were there, but the fear of going outdoors made it feel like a very, very lonely place. And yet I was surrounded by people. I think I haven't necessarily had the experience of being alone for any significant amount of time. I've done traveling, I've trekked across Dartmoor for night, navigated a night here and there, but certainly not for any major stretch of time. So that would be a new experience for me. I think it's interesting. We all have different examples and experiences of how it feels.
I think
And really,
that the big difference is just having like someone to bounce the ideas off. And
yeah,
I
holding a
don't,
hand. My mum's like, she misses holding my dad's hand. That's
I
it.
mean,
That physical connection.
I've been having a bit going on the last couple of weeks, and they've been a bit sort of stressful. So I've been quite lucky. I've been getting a lot of advice and counsel from my mum and my sister. But I remember sitting in Brighton a couple of weeks ago when I was having to do this and thinking this would be a lot easier if I had someone in the house with me to bounce these ideas, how I was going to respond to this email to this person or this text message, what I was going to do. And they'd gone through similar situations before, and so they were giving me the advice. But I remembered what my mum was saying when she sort of first moved in. It's just like having that other person to just bounce the ideas off and have things. But I wanted to touch upon that bit where you talked about being lonely around people. It may well be worse to be lonely when you're around people than when you're lonely alone. And the reason I say that is because when you're alone, you may think, well, when you're with people, you're not going to have that loneliness. Whereas and I know people like this, they're in a marriage, they've got their kids, and everything is so caught up on what you're doing day to day. You don't feel like you're connecting to your husband or your wife. And that could be worse because you're still going to be with those people probably in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and you've spent 15 years with them, and so it's kind of worse. So actually I feel for people if they're sat there with their big families and they feel lonely, because it may well be worse than my situation.
It's a good example of where we've got to go on a constant journey of self-discovery and discovery in others. Like, I've been married to my wife now for nearly 20 years next year. We're constantly discovering new things. And because, of course, we evolve as well. Our views change, the world changes. What we thought about something 10 years ago may not be the same way we think about something now. But we've got to proactively take the time to explore how our views have changed and where we are in the world and what we think about things. Otherwise, it will get lonely because you'll feel like potentially like you've said everything that there is to say. Of course, you've never said everything there is to say if you're willing to do the work. But I think that's where a lot of partnerships can get to that point. I found an interesting stat. I don't know how they've haven't done the background research to discover what this means, but I saw that it said the study showed that chronic loneliness is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I'm not quite sure how they quantify that. You may be more familiar, but there's an interesting kind of headline stat that I saw.
I think it's basically based on like life expectancy, but of course the flip side of that is it doesn't mean that if you're hanging out with people you can smoke 15 cigarettes a day. And although maybe it can, but I mean, yeah, I have that stat as well. Loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. So it's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And then I've got here, because you're now, how old are you? 45?
43, mate. 43.
Sorry, I've added 2 years to you. But more than one third of adults, according to the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control, in 2021, more than a third of adults aged 45 and older feel lonely, and nearly a quarter of adults aged 65 and older are socially isolated. That's slightly different, social isolation like we talked about. And in 2023, the US Surgeon General at the time, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued an advisory calling loneliness a public health crisis, linking it to serious health risks. And of course, 2023, that's 2-3 years into COVID. And I found COVID very interesting because I found that COVID helped shine a spotlight on basically a lot of the teachings of the beat model, because the teachings of the beat model talk about, social connection. They talk about being outside in nature. They talk about sunshine. My beat model talks about all this, and I've known it so clearly for 15 years, and COVID then shone a light to say, actually, what we need to be healthy is the people. What we need to be healthy is the outside space and the social connection. What connects us all is the breath, right? All of these things, but then people have forgotten about it already. Like, COVID is over, people go back to the thing, and it's really disappointing from my perspective, because I feel like I don't know that any real lasting change has happened on account of it. Maybe not.
Of course, there's an irony here as well. Like, we talked about this before in other episodes. We are arguably more connected than ever through social media, and yet people feel more lonely than ever before, because it's just not that real, genuine connection you would have if you're actually with that person in that same place. And I think sometimes we use that. Years gone by, you would have to go and travel and see those people and connect in real life. Now there's an ability to connect in shorthand messaging and group calls and things. It's just not the same. What I didn't know, and I don't know if our listeners knew this, it was I was quite astonished when I found this out. Did you know that in 2018 the UK appointed a minister for loneliness?
Maybe vaguely rings a bell, but I'm not sure they've
Theresa May appointed someone called Tracy Crouch. At the time, she was the Minister for Sport and Civil Society, and she became the Minister for Loneliness. And she said that because Theresa May said that loneliness is the sad reality of modern life for far too many people. I was like, wow, I did not know that. Maybe I should have known that. Maybe other people listening to this did know that. But it shows that the government are very aware of it. And as you said, probably because it does increase premature death by, was it 26%, you said?
Yeah, and there's another analysis here, the Holtlands meta-analysis, that showed that from 2015, social isolation and loneliness are associated with a 29% increased risk in heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. And the National Institute of Aging in 2020, loneliness is linked to higher rates of cognitive decline and dementia. So, there's quite a lot. And then when you were talking about technology, and as I've talked about many times on this show before, I feel like I'm becoming more and more of a Luddite, and that technology is a bit of a bugbear for me, because I see it infect so much of people's lives. But loneliness, right? Social media you were talking about, that can increase, and I feel like I'm not really on it a lot, and when I am, I'm pretty much post and ghosting. But it will increase a lot the feeling of exclusion or comparison. I remember I unfollowed certain connections, whether they were people that I knew in person or not, because I felt like I was constantly comparing myself to their amazing life. And so when you're passively scrolling and your only interactions, like you said, are maybe online, it will reduce that quality of the social connection, because you feel like you know people already without sort of having met them or seen them.
Being connected without being meaningfully connected, though, isn't it? That's the difference with tech and social media connection. Yeah. Like, it's that meaningful connection. I know you talk about in your beat model that's missing. It's not just the conversation; it's that emotional and physical connection that we yearn for as adults. And even with remote work change, we've got remote work in the workplace. Again, there's less incidental social contact now, because we're all on Zoom.
Well, yeah, Teams. You've been doing that for a while now, haven't you? You've been doing that, like, is it 8-10 years that you've been kind of
7 years? 7 years, yeah.
7 years.
Well, I spend 1 week a month in the office, and it's it does give you energy. I don't always fancy, a bit like you with this Mind Valley thing. Like, before it comes, like I love seeing the team, but you're going to be away from the family and the kids. When I'm there, I have a really, really good time. I can switch on to the team bit, and I come back energized. It's that thought process of going, I've got a 250-mile drive. I'm away from my family all week. I won't be able to see Leo play football or whatever. But when I'm there, actually, I get into that. It fills a different bucket, and it's really good to see the team.
I think next time I'll try and time it, because I think I was in Brighton when you were in St Albans. But if I'm in Barnet when you're in St Albans, it's not that far a drive for me to come up again and have dinner, like what site this.
Yeah, we should definitely do that, because we have a good time. But it's a good example. Like
stats in there for people listening. So a 2018 study in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology said limited social media to 30 minutes a day led to significant reductions in loneliness and depression. And University of Pennsylvania 2018, high usage of Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram was correlated with poorer well-being. Again, I don't think it's rocket science to
No.
know this, and it's not just elderly. In fact, it's probably more like the Gen Zs and the millennials. They're reporting the highest levels of loneliness. Okay, so I think they add, like, 'cause I feel like when my mum comes to Brighton, she seems to have a network of people that she meets up with and sees all the time. And here, I just got her to put into my calendar when she's doing certain things. So she has like a French class on a Friday. She's got the knitting class this other day. She's got the walking group this day. And she has 5 or 6.
For her, by the way, good for her. It's good.
Yeah, and it is kind of busy by my standards. But obviously, she's comparing it to being 24/7 with one person. And so when you're spending just an hour with other people and you get in the bus and you don't really know them that well, she still feel lonely, even though she's doing more than me. And I think it's all to do with what you're used to. I'm used to being by myself. Not that I particularly like it. I like it when I've got a relationship. I like it. I'd love to have a family and stuff. I do find that I do get a bit, and I've noticed this with some other friends of mine who are used to being by themselves. There can be this overwhelm or something, anxiety, when you're around people for too long, especially if you're both used to being in your own space. I think this happened last year with me when I was connecting with someone, and we we're both used to being in our own space, making our own decisions, deciding what we're going to do without that collaboration. And I think it became a bit difficult. And I don't want to be like that, because obviously that becomes harder and harder as you get older and older. You end up having your own little set ways. But yeah, I think it's about what you're used to a lot of the time. And so I'm used to being by myself. And so sometimes being around people, like when I was in Colombia last year, I was staying in a house with a few guys, and it was, it was fun and I really liked it. And I liked having the conversations around the table, but I had to go off for myself for like 4 or 5 days at a time just to do a bit of self
Yeah.
and travel, because being with someone the whole time is too much for me.
That's the idea of balance, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
You
but
can
people
achieve
don't get
that the
it.
other way,
People don't get it if you're in a family, because that hour yoga class for them is the highlight of their week, because that's when they get to be, doing their own thing. And
Right.
I get that, but I get that intellectually rather than experientially. And it's only really, I think, sometimes when I'm doing extended periods of babysitting where I'm realizing, especially if I've got the 1-year-old and she's into everything at the moment. And obviously none of our houses are baby proofed. And so you've got to be really, really on it. And so you can barely go to the toilet, because so often I'll have the toilet open and just make sure I'm looking, like keeping a lookout for her.
Talking about kids, I had a pang of what it might feel like to have that feeling of loneliness. Although it's unfair, because I have my son and my wife here and all my friends that will stay the same. But my daughter Eva's obviously just finished her GCSEs and she went to a prom. And she said to me, when I finish college, I want to be an international travel journalist and I want to go and live abroad. And at 18, I'm going to be gone. And it's like, obviously she'll come back and see us and we've got a great relationship. But you have that pang of, I've got 2 years left until she flees the nest. And the feeling immediately was one of kind of loneliness, kind of like, I'm not ready for her to go. I'm going to miss her energy in the house and the conversations that we have. And I felt terribly sad. Of course, it's unfair on those I'm still in the house with, but I really enjoy those chats. So I had a pang of what it might feel like when she gave that to me. And I said to her, I'm really excited for you on one hand. Of course I am, because my daughter wanted to go and achieve all the things she wants to achieve. Selfishly, I feel, I guess, you shouldn't think about things that haven't happened yet. I know that. That's our thoughts controlling our feelings. So every feeling lives in the shadow of a thought. But the thought crossed my mind of, I'm going to really miss you. And it made you feel that, like, that created that feeling in the tummy, that your second brain.
Well, I mean, on the good news, rising costs of living, and if she wants to ever buy a house something, she might end up living.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, like, Greek culture is different from like English culture, I think. And my friends who are English, a couple of them, they couldn't wait to get out of home. They had a fine relationship with their parents, but as soon as they were 18, they were working anyway, and they were using mostly their part-time job instead of studying for their A levels. So as soon as they're 18, they left home, they started renting a place with other people, and they moved out 30 years ago, effectively. Myself, slightly different situation. I guess I sort of moved out when I went to uni, but I was home during all the holidays. then I was away for 2-3 years traveling, but then I was back. And then I probably lived at home 6 years, I think, from 24 to 30 until I could afford to get a place. So it was very different to like leaving at 18 and flying the nest and never seeing. But that is the reality for many families. That you only have 2 summers left, which is quite,
But then I also remember as a 18-year-old, I couldn't wait to get out quickly enough. I was just like Eva, like I was like, hey dad, like, you've watched every football match I've ever played since the age of like 4 years old. You've been there every single weekend for 14 years. I didn't take any of that into consideration. I was gone. I was like, university, freshers week, here we go. See you later. Thanks very much. Because I was an 18-year-old, you don't always think. I remember my sister saying to me, my younger sister saying, dad really grieved when you left. Like, it hit him really hard. And like those calls weren't coming in every day. I was partying, drinking, having fun, joining social clubs. And I was looking forward, not backwards. And I had no appreciation whatsoever. So until now, really, how he must have felt when that happened. I feel quite sad thinking about it. But yeah, you know what? I was just living my life. He wouldn't have minded. He knew who I was. But
the parents want the best for you. I mean, I still vividly remember my parents' faces dropping me off at Heathrow in November. I think it was November 21st, 1999. I remember the date because it happened to be my parents' wedding anniversary on the November 21st. And I remember walking, I could see them like holding hands or hugging, and just the picture getting smaller and smaller as I was walking further and further. And we didn't know at the time, myself nor them, how long I was going to go away for. In my head, I thought I want to give it at least 3 months, maybe up to a year. We didn't know that it would be over 25 months before I would see them again. And
that's a long time, actually. Just leaving the house.
And 25 months. And back then, communication wasn't as robust as it is now. So I went pretty much the entire time I was in Asia, which was 6 months. I didn't speak to them on the phone. Like, there was emails coming to and from, but it was over 6 months where they didn't hear my voice until I got to Australia. And then I figured out a way to make cheaper phone calls. And so I was able to speak to them. But it was 25 months. And then I came back. And in those 2 years, they had probably aged at least 10 years. And I think about how old they were in 1999. So I think my mum was only 48. So she was my age. And I always like, you think your parents are really old. Like, because you're, but she was my age. And my dad would have been, I guess, 50 something, 53 or something. And I felt they were really old. And then when they came back 2 years later, they're still in their 50s or late 40s. Yeah, my mum would have been 50 because I think she had a retirement thing at 50 from one of the schools. But they looked so much older. And I remember thinking that. And that might have been the reason, I think I might have mentioned it before, but it might have been the reason why since then I didn't have any really long trips. I had a couple of 3-4 week trips, but Colombia last year, 5 weeks was the longest, and then until Bali in Thailand, where it was 10 weeks. And that's the longest I've done in 25 years. And I think there was always that little bit of guilt of not, and that's partly why I maybe haven't pursued like living abroad and a few other things, apart from 6 months in Greece.
Well, I know when I'm working with clients on a coaching capacity, and you probably do the same when you coach yours, one thing that often comes to mind when you're dealing with either imposter syndrome, you're dealing with loneliness, all these different things that people often struggle with. I'll say something. Who's the person in your phone book you haven't called, but you should have done? Everyone's got that friend or that family member where you kind of, like 25 months in your instance, if you and I had that call, I'd say, Harry, like, give your parents a call, just check in, because actually you'll get energy from that. And I always, very rarely, I don't think actually say rarely, never in my experience, I'm sure it's happened, have I had a coaching call and we've gone through this process where they've identified the individual, they've made a commitment to, I'm going to get in touch with them. If they come back the next time we've met and said it was a bad experience, it's always been very positive. It's always led to something really positive. It's been really good. And actually, there's something in making that first move as well, to be the person that picks up the phone to the other rather than waiting to be called, because you could both wait forever. It never happens. Yeah. And then you can naturally lose touch with people that actually you really value in your life and you really want that connection with. But life, as you said, sometimes gets in the way. Because I always say, when you live in London, you don't really do any of the hotspots. If you go there for a day, you do everything. When you live in London, you don't do it because you think, I can always do it tomorrow. So it just keeps on going. You end up moving away and realize you never did all the key things you would have done when you visited on holiday. I think it's the same thing with friends and family. Sometimes you think they're in your phone book. they know you're here, and I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. So when we have a coaching conversation, I say, no, commit to it. Find a day, find that person. By the time we meet again, make that contact, and let's talk about it. And it's always, without fail, so far, touch wood, been a positive output, a positive moment. So I don't know if anyone's listening or watching this, there's something you can do. Don't say I'll do it tomorrow. Do it now.
I had a friend I still have a friend, someone I actually visited. I've not spoken to since I visited them in Vegas in 2023, September 2023. We're very close when we meet up and everything. And then a couple of weeks ago, I think she was in Europe with her boyfriend, and I said, oh, I saw it on Instagram. I said, oh, are you about for a call or something? And she said, oh no, next week. But next week was last week, and I still didn't make the call. So this week I should make a call for her, because we used to have like good old chats, but very infrequently, but always good chats. So I think the thing is that people don't pick up the phone enough. There's a few friends that I still quite happy to pick up the phone and not have a reason to pick up the phone other than just chat to them. But I think people get surprised by phone calls because we just don't have.
This is if you go back to the working from home thing, so I've just interjected, but I think a lot of the relationships now, we're in a, it's funny because there's lots of statistics for those who want to look into it about how actually the younger generation struggle with loneliness even more. But I think we've got into a world of transactional relationships rather than transformational ones. But you and I still would rather meet over a curry and dinner and have a really good chat than we would text or message. We share text messages, but it doesn't really, it's a transactional exchange. You'll send a link, I might watch it, I may not. I'll send a link, we might do an emoji on it. But there's no transformational relationship happening there. Transformation happens. This whole podcast, if we use this as an example, that transformational thing happened when we met in person and shared dinner together, and it led us to here. We'd never have got here in the same way had we just been sharing messages and staying in touch in the new way of doing things. And I think remote working's exacerbated that. That'd be my view. I think it's exacerbated the disconnection from self, disconnection from others.
I think, it was Steve Jobs when he was designing the new Apple building in California, and he designed it like this donut thing. But there was something about the way that they designed it. It was either to do, they called it the water cooler effect, but it was to make these incidental interactions between teams from different departments. And actually, I was reading a book recently by Matthew Syed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Matthew Syed's work. Bounce is a really good book, but the other one, so the other one is Rebel Ideas.
That's the one for viewers. Oh, look, sure.
Yes. Yeah, you've gone. Yeah, Bounce. There we go. But his other book called Rebel Ideas, and Rebel Ideas also mentioned this idea of random interactions between disparate groups of people with different types of thinking. Because if you're always getting the same kind of people together, always having the same kind of thinking, then you're not going to have any unique, interesting ideas. And so. Yeah, the point is that these random interactions that you have at the toilets, locking up your bike, washing your hands, getting a cup of coffee, they can build connections, they can build ideas, and you only really get that in-person interaction. And so this whole working from home stuff, I think I was talking to someone about it the other day and asking, it was a student of mine, actually. She's an architect. And she comes to my yoga classes, very dedicated, comes to every single class. And I was asking her, and she was saying that mostly they're kind of hybrid, like 3 days in the office and 2 days maybe not. Because I was thinking as well with architecture, if you're in an architecture team, you want to bounce ideas off each other constantly, and you don't want to have Zoom on constantly, although that's what some teams do. But you need that. And I think there is a benefit to having the flexibility of working from home when you've got the boiler guy coming round. You want to get to your children's school play early. And so I think definitely the pandemic helped with that in terms of making it more acceptable to be able to work from anywhere and show that you could. But I do think that if I was a boss, maybe, I don't know, I see like Elon Musk and people like that wanting to insist on people coming back to the office. I can see where they're coming from as well, because I feel like there's definitely more that happens maybe in some respects in terms of creative opportunity.
there are things we can do. Right? I know we called the show the Mindful Past podcast. We talk, mindfulness kind of brought us together, right? An awareness of our emotional states. And I think that if we open the door to vulnerability through mindfulness, I think we can improve how we feel if we are feeling like we are emotionally withdrawing. Mindfulness can also interrupt those kind of patterns of avoidance if we're avoiding seeing other people. You're a bit more of an expert here than I am, certainly on the meditation side. Is there kind of a 60-second mindfulness exercise that listeners could do immediately that you might recommend? Or what kind of things would you recommend if people are struggling with loneliness that can maybe help them snap out of it? One of them would be, from my side, to get the ball rolling, would be, find a friend you haven't spoken to in your phone book and give them a call this week and commit to speaking to them. If you can do more than one, great. But that's probably a nice place for, I would.
I think, yes, if you want to defeat, as it were, that loneliness moment with an interaction with other people, I think, certainly sending a text or a voice memo to someone, even if you don't want to pick up the phone because you don't want to disturb them or whatever, can be useful. But I think what is also quite useful is I feel like you don't really feel lonely when you feel connected to source, connected to spirit, and I don't want this to sound like religious or metaphysical or anything like that. There's a certain connection that one can get. So I think, like, in terms of a 60-second practice, I mean, maybe, to be honest, a good one that's jumped into my head, and it's not specifically designed for this, it's more designed for a bit of anxiety or stress, but it's one of the heart math solutions. So I've talked about heart math before, but I'm not sure if I've ever talked about one of the processes. And it's called, I believe it's called the freeze frame process. And for listeners who are not driving right now, listening to this, or doing anything that they can't stop for a moment, that you can do it very, very rapidly. So firstly, the stressful situation, the loneliness situation, whatever it might be, you take a pause as if you're pausing a video on YouTube, and you just freeze frame on what you're doing, literally what you're thinking about. Close your eyes, and then you start to imagine like you're breathing through your heart. So obviously you're breathing through your nose, or hopefully not your mouth, but you're breathing through your nose. But you imagine that the air is coming in and out of the heart, right? And it can help to put your hand on the heart. So you can do this as I'm speaking right now. So you close your eyes, you breathe in and out of your heart a few times, and you start to bring to your head or mind, on the screen of your mind, something that makes you feel good. It might be playing with your children. It might be walking along the beach barefoot. It might be laughing at someone's joke, but something that makes you feel a certain way, like a positive way, whilst you're breathing in and out of the heart. And then what you do is you just ask your body, and you ask your, the connection that you have to whatever it is you believe in, what would be a better response in this moment? Right? What would be a better response in this moment? And then you intuitively allow whatever comes up to come up, right? It might be, I used this technique a couple of times in the last few weeks, actually, because I was feeling a bit stressed and anxious. But you can use it for loneliness as well, where you just think, okay, well, you know what? I am loved. I have my friends. I have like these people that said call me, or like my nieces look up to me like adoringly when, I think right now I'm thinking of a picture that my mum sent of the 1-year-old that's getting into everything.
Yeah.
So my mum was looking after her by herself on Friday night, and she didn't really want to touch the salmon and veg, unusually, that my mum had made, because she normally likes that stuff. But the frozen smoothie that I defrosted, it was a chocolate one, she was all over it, and she had a little moustache on her from drinking the smoothie, and she was all over that, and all my cars as well from when I was a kid. And so if I want to feel connected instead of lonely, even though I'm not physically with that person, I can feel that, and I can remember that picture, and I can remember how she feels around me as well at the times that I am with her. So that can be a nice little tool.
That's something hopefully new as well. And I think you were almost doing it in real time as you'd explained it. I was trying to follow along at the same time. I think there are little things we can do as well day to day, and these might seem really trivial, but you'd be surprised how many of the small margins can make a difference. Like when you are walking down the street or you're passing someone in the office, like smile at them. Try and build that connection, that physical connection with somebody by just smiling. If you can evolve that smile into a hello or a conversation, then do that, because we need to make space for the real world connections. We do a lot about digital detoxing and all these different things, but we need to make space for that real world connection, which you and I have talked about before, that you really highlight in your beat model as well. Sometimes the obvious things, if people are feeling lonely, we'll go and join a club, go and join a class or a volunteer group. And of course we can do those things as well. But that's kind of a big step to take. I think if you're really struggling with this, start with a smile and then see if you can build that smile into a conversation. My father-in-law is amazing at this. Every round of golf I play takes about 6 hours, and I play with him because he speaks to every single person on the course. We must try everyone. Like, Leo, my son, said, sometimes I'm like grandpa, and we'll go somewhere to a cafe or whatever, and I end up speaking to everyone in the cafe, and he's like, we're going to be here for hours. I want to go home. But it's nice. Like I sometimes feel like connection speaking to strangers. And I think that's the beauty of this. What is actually, the government have called it a pandemic, right? But loneliness can be deadly, as you talked about, was at 26%, but it's reversible. We can do something about it, whether it's through mindfulness, whether it's through the heart math that you talked about, whether it's...
The other thing I wanted to say in terms of really addressing loneliness, which is something I've talked about many times, but I've brought up some stats here as well, is of course gratitude. Now, practicing gratitude, right, increase feelings of social connection and significantly reduce loneliness over time, according to a study Chancellor and Bermeski, 2013. Another study, Alan Barton et al., 2021. Couples who express gratitude towards each other experience stronger relationship bonds and lower levels of emotional loneliness. And then Emmons, I think Emmons is one of the forefront people when it comes to positive psychology. Emmons and McCullough, 2003, one of the most cited gratitude studies. Participants who wrote in a gratitude journal for 10 weeks felt 25% more optimistic and more socially connected than control groups. So basically, people that keep gratitude journals spend more time helping others as well, strengthening interpersonal bonds. And I could go...
It's a good example that sometimes when you take one action, it leads to another. So feeling more optimistic about the world makes you more likely then to step out of it and make those connections. So that, all these things are connected. Interestingly as well.
Because, sorry to interrupt, because it just jumped into my head. That I have this gratitude practice with my family and stuff, and one person won't do it. And I know that it would benefit that person immensely to have done it now. If they've been doing it daily, like we have been doing it daily for 6.5 years, that person would be a different person, I'm sure, in some respects. And they said to us, I think they were challenging the other day, and I'm not sure if they listened to our podcast, probably not, but they were challenging the other day one of the things that my mum had written in there, because they were saying, oh, that's not really a gratitude. And I think I went back and said, well, the person writing the gratitude list gets to determine whatever they want to put in there, right? Right. And I didn't say maybe you should get started as well, but I think they from their perspective, I think they said that and I kind of got it or accepted it, I think they felt like overwhelmed or stressed out by doing it if they were to do it. Not that they've actually tried to do it. I think they maybe put it in 6 times in 6 years. But I just know that if you get into the habit, and it doesn't have to take long, maybe it may take a few minutes the first few times you do it, but afterwards it's really easy to find simple things to be grateful for. And it will express the mind differently. It will make you emotionally more available, socially receptive. It will make you happier. It will help with your sleep. It will help with your digestion. It will help with so many things, but you can't make people do things. But I just know that it will be a benefit.
A point here, so I agree with you, and I'm going to give an alternative opportunity for listeners who may have tried the gratitude diary, process journal, whatever, and it not work for them. Through to ultimately consistency and routine and habit is king, right? There's no point doing it for 3 days. Well, there's no point. There's less point doing it for 3 days. If you're not going to sustain with it 6.5 years, you see the results. What's worked for me, and I try with gratitude diaries, I've got loads of them around the house where we've started and not quite managed to finish. Try to get the kids to do them. But this is the one thing that's remained with me. And funnily enough, I discovered it through reading the book called Storytelling. And this guy writes it. He's a world champion storyteller. They do storytelling competitions in the US, and he's won it multiple times. And he wrote this book. What he does, and it's not for gratitude, but it kind of does a similar thing, or has since I've adopted the practice, which is at the end of each day, I write one sentence. It can be two or three, but typically at least one sentence of what the day consisted of. A story from the day. You know me, my mantra since knowing me has always been life's about stories. So this obviously resonated with me pretty strongly when I read it. I was like, why don't I do that? So I write the story of the day in one sentence every single day. And doesn't always have. Sometimes I might do it the following day when I wake up. So I have the journal by my office desk where I'm guaranteed to do it. So I'll maybe do it on the day it's happened or the following day. But what's really interesting is over time, what makes you consistent is if you don't write that sentence in, you feel like you've missed a day of your life. Because if I go back now to June 2024, I've got no idea what I did. Right? I wouldn't be able to tell you. If I go back to that book and read the story of the day, it brings back everything that happened on that day. And you know what? If you miss a day, it's quite painful because you feel like you've lost a day of your life. And we go through days every single day of our lives forgetting what's actually happened, and we don't always appreciate what that story was. Some of them are usually the stories in there are pretty funny. It's the funny moment of the day, or all the exciting things. So Leo winning most improved player at the recent awards. I've got the date and time that happened. I'll have that for life. I can tell you now, 10 years on from now, I'd never know the exact date. Have I not written it down? That he won most improved player as an 11-year-old, right? So sometimes you have these to look back to. I think it's different to a diary because it's short. It's a one sentence story of the day, but it makes you grateful a different way. I'm not saying I am grateful for, and that's where people often struggle. Yeah. But when you look back over time, you just realize you're grateful for the stories. So that's been a really helpful practice for me that people might find easier to adopt. And if you're interested in reading it, it's from a book called Storytelling. But I found that really quite powerful for me. Interesting to move the conversation on slightly because I discovered earlier that there was a minister for loneliness I didn't know in Theresa May's government. And I did some research while we're live on the call to see if we still have one now. And we do. He's called Stuart Andrew. He's the Minister for Loneliness, Equalities and Civil Society. And he leads the cross-government task force that's tackling loneliness. And has been tackling that for the past 5 years. This is from the New Statesman in 2024, which I thought was quite interesting. But within the New Statesman article, it says the scale of the problem is, this is bear in mind, it says January 24, so a year out of date. But nearly a quarter of adults across 142 countries say they feel lonely. That's a Meta Gallup study. In the UK, 28% of adults report feeling lonely often, always, or some of the time. That's according to the Office of National Statistics. And as we mentioned, the health impacts in relation to smoking and obesity. But the surprising truth from the article is younger people report feeling lonelier than older generations, which we kind of alluded to earlier on this show before I found this research, which means scrolling on your phone for hours a day doesn't always lead to connection. Again, nothing new here. We've kind of tackled it. But it's interesting that it's in the report. So again, if it says it's a persistent challenge, 6 years of targeted strategy, and yet UK loneliness levels have actually risen from 6% of adults reporting frequent loneliness in 2018 to 7% in 2023. The UK was the first country in the world to launch a national loneliness strategy, inspired by the legacy of the late MP Jo Cox. So I thought that was just some interesting stats there. This is a real pandemic, really.
It needs to be taken a bit more seriously. I've just been looking up as well while you were speaking about what's actually been done since this post has been created, and it's part of it's not a cabinet role in itself, but it's part of the sports tourism cabinet role. But what have we got? We've got annual tackling loneliness report. So they since in March 2023, the 4th annual report was published. Did
you know this existed? I didn't. It's new for me. Maybe some of our listeners are not fully aware of these reports, but certainly I wasn't.
Been allocated since 2018 to establish community initiatives, social prescribing. Social prescribing is a good one. I'm not sure if it's out widely in the NHS. I know it was in Scotland because I referenced it in one of my studies from 2017, I think, when I was doing my dissertation, where you go to the NHS, you go to a doctor and you give them the symptoms, but instead of prescribing,
they give you a gardening cup to go to or something like that.
Yeah, they give you something to go to, and I think that's really good. And I think
actually
that I've just joined does something like that actually in Brighton, which is good.
My mum's been doing breathing yoga.
Which we all meet yoga?
Breathing yoga. She lost her husband, and it's a grieving. Yeah.
My mum goes to a grief cafe, which I think I don't know if she goes still, but I think that was better for her. And then she didn't want to do therapy and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's better at the cafe because you go and you chat with other people, and it's basically the
I
same
guess
thing.
I guess it's not such a surprise they've got a minister for it when you consider some of the groups such as trans and LGBTQ plus communities that maybe do feel isolated, not always included. I guess if you're not feeling included, the opposite, you've got your yin yang diagram, but on your visual here, the opposite of inclusion is probably loneliness anyway, right, to a certain degree. So I can understand that's probably why I've noticed in his title there, it's loneliness and equalities and civil society. So I imagine in the equality element as well, it's focused on inclusion and getting everybody involved.
The thing is, the rates have been rising even since this was put in. I think Parliament noted an increase of 500,000 lonely people since 2020. So yeah, I think, I don't know. Sometimes there's a lot of bluster with these things and not really much actual action. And I think,
Yeah.
like many things, ultimately, it comes down to the individual. Now, I'm not saying the individual is responsible for any of this stuff or to blame, let's say, for any of these things, because the way urban planning is, the way that people are in cars more, especially if they're not in cities where public transportation, it leads
working remotely, which we typically volunteer to
all of
do.
these social things affect us. But ultimately, just like when it comes to diet and food, where yes, we're being advertised McDonald's and Burger King, not eat carrots and broccoli. So it's really hard for us to compete against that. But ultimately, if we want to wait until society or the government steps in and says, right, from now on, we're going to be walking and cycling everywhere. We're going to take public transport. We're going to have only health. If you wait, you're going to be waiting thousands of years. So, although government has a role, although community has a role, ultimately, no one is more responsible for your life as an adult than you are. And
well,
so,
you raise a really good point. I think this is where it brings the show, maybe the Mindful Path show, in the context of why we launched it, full circle, right? Because a lot of people think that real mindfulness practice is just noticing your breath. Now, you and I know that's not the case, but that's what people are like, oh, you're doing meditation, you're going, and you're sat in that, the position, and you're going, doing OMS, which is not, of course, not the case. It's not meditation. Mindfulness is something completely separate. Mindfulness is also about noticing what's around you, who's around you. And if no one is, there's an opportunity then for you to take that action you just mentioned and reach out first. Like, a lot of it's about noticing and reflection, right? And I think if you're feeling lonely, when you are practicing mindfulness, what are you noticing? Who are you connected with? Are there things or actions you could take to build that connection that isn't through sending an Instagram hey or Facebook hi? It's actually picking up the phone and arranging a meeting, or going out in the street and smiling at someone and striking up a conversation.
I mean, it really is
hard. It is
self-inquiry, this whole mindfulness thing. It's about understanding yourself. And I was having this conversation in a different capacity yesterday with someone, because I was talking to them about the aura ring, which we've talked about many times, saying how I had lost it a few years ago, and I was debating whether I would get a replacement because I already knew what worked, what didn't work. I did like the accountability, but I am often in a position where I wake up in the morning, and we shouldn't need technology to tell us how we feel, right? We should be able to do this anyway. I can, within probably 3 or 4 like marks, get the numbers that the ring is going to tell me, because I'm pretty in tune with how I feel anyway. Yes, I've been doing meditation for over a decade, yoga for 15 odd years, and that really helps understand the body, understand my mind, understand how I feel connected in the morning. And it's amazing how it tallies up, because how I feel and how this is. So we shouldn't really need devices, and I understand why people have them in the beginning, because it helps you train you. But really, mindfulness is about that present moment awareness. It's about self-inquiry, about understanding, oh, well, actually, yeah, this person has done this stuff, and that has now affected how I've decided to feel about it. And that's like, I've noticed, like, my sleep has not been very great the last couple of weeks, because I've been waking up because of pain for the foot, but also I've had a bit of a stressful period. And now that stressful period is over, it's interesting, because literally since almost the day that I got an answer on something, my resilience shot up, and it's been steadily climbing for 5 days now. The sleep has steadily been climbing for 5 days. And I've been feeling good in the mornings when I'm waking up, whereas before I knew I didn't feel great, and the stats showed it. So, yeah, it's all about being present, moment aware, being an element of self-inquiry. I'm keep drinking this hydrogen water. You might hear the little buzz.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to the stuff now. So.
Good. But also, there's a reason that people, so many people undertake talking therapy, right? And it's really important. I'll always go back to Michael Neal's quote where if everyone just went outside and spoke to a lamppost for 30 minutes a day, the nation would be feeling much better about itself. Imagine the power of actually speaking to someone who could talk back. Often we suffer in silence. So I think let's round this off here. We've natted on for quite some time. I didn't realize how long we've been going for, which is great. Your one action then. My one action is going to be one I've already mentioned. Go through your phone book. Who's the one person you think you should have probably reached out to? You haven't for whatever reason. Be the first person. Reach out. Connect with them in a conversation, not on a WhatsApp, not on a text. Have a conversation. If you can meet up, even better. That'd be the one action I would recommend. What's the one action that you would recommend to our listeners to help them if they're feeling a little bit lonely right now, which we know statistically 28% of them probably are?
You know what I would probably do? Something I did a couple of times the last week or so is striking up a minor conversation with someone in a supermarket or wherever. I think I was guiding them on a product to buy or not buy, and it's different when I'm in Brighton. I feel like everyone's a bit more chilled, a bit more relaxed, and a bit more less in a rush than London. And I sometimes go in with London mode where I'm just in a rush. And there was a couple of times where I'm shopping at local places. I'm engaging a lot more with the person serving than I normally do. So I would probably say that start with a really simple action of maybe spending an extra 3 to 5 seconds engaging with someone than you would normally have done. Like you said earlier, maybe just smile when you are giving the change or something like that. I'd keep it simple.
Yeah, love that. Well, that's probably a good place to finish. We've natted on. Hopefully, we've kept company or listeners company during the last hour, so they didn't feel lonely. They were able to join us on this audio or this video format, depending on which way they like to absorb the podcast. But Harry, look, you always energize me every time we chat, my friend. So good to see you. I'm not feeling lonely right now. Always love connecting. Let's do dinner next time in St Albans, which I will be there actually for the second week in July. So let's get that in the diary. I think week of the 9th. There you go. If anyone else wants to join us,
I may well be here. Week of the 9th, did you say? 9th is a Wednesday. So 7th.
It's that week. So yeah, we're down on that. So listen, we have to plan it live on the show. We'll end up with.
Yeah, we'll have to do it. I think I may be around. Yeah.
Well, I know you're a very busy guy, traveling the world. So hopefully you are. We'll do another curry and we'll put the world to rights. Thanks for joining me today. I know we've gone on. Thanks, listeners, for joining us. Remember to subscribe, follow, like, share. Most importantly, leave us a review. It'd be amazing. That really helps us reach a wider audience. People don't realize how much a review has an impact on other people being able to see the show. So please do leave us a review if you get a moment. Otherwise, until next time, Harry, it's been good to connect, buddy. Good to see you. Good to connect and good to chat. And
nice to chat to you and to everyone listening. Thanks for joining us, and keep connecting.